Hi everyone and welcome back to my top 500 games. At number 487 we have Enchanted Land. This is an Amiga game that I had when I was little, and it's a platformer, like a 2D side-scrolling platformer, and there's a few distinct features that I remember about it. I remember you played as a sort of wizard and you climbed like roots of like giant flowers and all that lot, and sometimes you went into caves and you always like collected items. Just basic platform game stuff that you would expect there to be anywhere. Two things that really stand out to me, well, aside from the fact that there's walls with giant faces on them, which just looked strange, the two things that I remember that stood out to me particularly was that it was one of those games where the levels were massive. You know, it seems to me that there's a certain type of platformer, like 2D platformer, where the characters can like jump around really like rapidly all over the place, and the levels are just massive with all these platforms like darted around the level. Enchanted Land, I don't think it wasn't really that, but it did seem to have big levels from my recollection. I might be wrong there. And I also remember you could pick up and use different weapons to attack the enemies with. I only really remember 3 weapons. I only liked the default one. Like, the default one was like a magic wand that you just like zapped a bit of lightning in front of you. It was just like a basic attack. There was one where you could like throw a stone that like kind of like arced over, which was annoying because you had to like aim it. If you watch the AVGN, he has a few videos where he complains about weapons in games that do that. And the other one I remember was like this orb that floated and like spun around you. Like, imagine like the shields you can get in the Mega Man games, apart from it's just one of them and it goes really slowly and it never disappears. I just remember that, and I remember thinking that it was interesting, but it was really awkward trying to like line it up with the enemy and all that. So yeah, that's Enchanted Land for you. Number 486 is Wii Sports. This is a game that everyone should know now. It came with the Wii. It was one of those games that just came with the Wii for free. It was bundled in. When I got one of the later Wiis when I got mine, so my copy of Wii Sports came in one of those cardboard cases rather than, you know, the DVD boxes that most people, I think, got theirs in. But I remember, it was one of those things where it was like mid to late 2000s, I think, around this time, where the Wii came out, and the idea was that it was a casual console and anyone can pick up and play it. It was very simple. I still had some enjoyment with it. I remember enjoying trying to get my my bowling rank above 1,000, so you could get that sparkly, that bowling ball with all the stars on it. And I remember one of the bowling minigames as well sort of like grew the amount of pins, so you could eventually have like you had a triangle of 10 and then you added 5, so you had a triangle of 15, and then you had another 6 to the back, so you had a triangle 21. It just kept building up to this massive triangle, and you had to see how many pins you could knock over with this massive triangle of stuff. I really liked that. I really did. That was quite a bit of fun, that, trying to, you know, get the bowling ball to knock over the massive amount of pins. I wasn't too fond of a few of the other games, like boxing. I didn't care for boxing at all, just didn't care. Tennis was alright. The baseball one was alright. There was probably something else that I can't remember, but I only really liked those 3, I think. But yeah, golf, didn't really care for golf either. Number 485, we have Entwined. This is a game that came out on the PS3, and I think it eventually came on PS4, or it might have come out at the same time, I don't remember, but they actually advertised this at E3, so I imagine Sony had some ties to it. I don't know if it was one of Sony's primary studios that made it, I can't remember, but yeah, they did show this at E3, and it's one of those, like, you are basically going down a tunnel, and you control a fish and a bird, and you have to sort of use the analog sticks to control them, and you have to line them up with these gates of their colour so that they could fly through and you'd get points. The problem I had with it was that I felt like I had to be so specific sometimes, and at the end of the level you had this thing where you turned into a dragon, you had to fly around and like collect things. I remember the last level where you turned into a dragon was a real pain because you had to get like all these birds or something to like follow you. I hated that. And then when it came to like the endless modes, or the ones where you're gonna like score points outside of the main story, I just didn't bother. Okay, now we're moving up to our first clump here, because at number 484 we have Vector Man 2, and at number 483 we have Vector Man. So this is my first example of a clump here, where we have 2 games next to each other. sort of like in the same series, similar sort of games. I was never that big on Vector Man. I know there were some people who really liked it, but to me it wasn't all that much. Like I thought the field of view was really low. Like you had to, and it was one of those games where you moved really fast, but the camera's really low, so you kind of missed off like a lot of your surroundings. You had to be very careful with stuff. People say that about Sonic, but they're wrong. Sonic isn't like that. So you play as this collection of balls. It was one of those like interesting graphic things where everything looked 3D because it was a 3D style sprite. So it was kind of like parts of Vector Man like bounced around individually. Like, do you remember the fighting game Balls? I think it was kind of that same kind of thing, but obviously it had a bigger appeal than Balls did. Yeah. I remember I thought it was interesting when you like blew things up and they released those little sparkles that you picked up, like the way that they fell and separated at the same time, so you kind of like had to pick them before they fell through the floor. That was quite interesting. It was also interesting the way you could transform into different types of different creatures and stuff based on the environment, but it wasn't, I didn't think it was too much to brag on about really. So that was the first clump there where I've just talked about to sort of like cover two games just in the same entry, but that's what I mean by clump. But I'm going to move on. Number 482 is Rainbow Islands. This was an old, probably on quite a few systems. I remember it had that tune where it kind of stole the theme for Somewhere Over the Rainbow from Wizard of Oz, but kind of changed it just a little bit. It was kind of like a vertical platform game, so your power was that you could unleash like a rainbow, and if the rainbow hit something, then it would kill the enemy, but you also use the rainbow as a platform to get upwards. And this is how you progress through the levels, because all the levels were vertical. You actually used the rainbows, and you could get power-ups, and you could like extend them so you're shooting 2 rainbows at a time, or 3 rainbows at a time. And I think it was just one of those games where you just have to get points. Like you get to the top, and then it's like this treasure chest, raise out loads of treasure, and you just have to go and pick up the treasure. I think there was, I think I remember like there might have been like a bee boss or something. I don't know. But I have an inkling that there was a boss that was a bee. Quite a fast-paced game, I suppose. Okay, number 481 is Virtua Fighter 2 for the Genesis. I had actually played the Sega Saturn version of the arcade, and this was because there was a Hollywood Bowl that I used to go to every so often with my granddad on Saturdays. There was like arcade machines, and I'd play Virtua Fighter 2, which was like the Saturn version. And I was at such a young age where to the point where 3D seemed like a big, like amazing thing. It was so like interesting. But yeah, I remember I got Virtua Fighter 2 for the Genesis, or Mega Drive rather. And like I did with the Game Boy Advance, I sort of like, because I played the Sega Saturn version, I sort of had like this idea that the Genesis, or Mega Drive version rather, would be up to par with it. I don't know why I thought these things. I was just being stupid. Or just being a kid probably with an overactive imagination. But it was just some standard fighting game. What I remember specifically about this game is I don't remember any of the differences between any of the characters. I remember the characters themselves, but I don't remember how they're any different at all. But I do remember you went through the characters in arcade mode in a set order. So I think it was Lau was always the first round, and then Sarah was always the second round. And it kind of went on from there until I think maybe Jackie was the last one before you fought Dural, who was like the secret character. And I remember you could unlock Dural by going to the character select and pressing like and going like off the screen, like scrolling off so that it wrapped around like 10 or so many times. It would count down and go 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, and then you unlock Dural as a character. I don't remember if there's any advantage to playing as Dural, but yeah, it was. I remember playing that and having quite a bit of fun with that, even if it wasn't the version that I was really after. Number 480 is 2048. This is a game that sort of drove people mad it sort of came to my attention like early 2014, I suppose, where you gotta sort of like match up numbers so that they double into each other, and you gotta make one to 2048. I never did it. I know those people who tried forever and they never did it, and they've sort of like developed strategies, because the way that it worked is that you push all the numbers in one direction on this grid, and they'd all push towards that wall, and you had to like combine the numbers of the same value to combine them and double them. And I remember that people had sort of like different strategies, like focus everything towards one corner, or don't never go up, things like that. It kept people busy for a while. Number 479 is Dead Space Ignition. I never got into the Dead Space series as a whole, but I remember playing this game. It was quite interesting because it was like a series of like puzzles and like a series of mini games, but they were okay. Like I remember the one that I didn't really like was there was one where you had to break open this infection thing or whatever, and so it was kind of like a tower defense. We have to like send these different weird spirally things, like go along one of the walls or go along another wall or whatever, and getting them through without having them all die or like break through the wall. I don't really remember, but I do remember. I think my favourite one of those mini games was the racing one, because you could pick up power ups to race. You had to like go up and down to avoid like the walls. If you crashed, it was like game over. You had to restart, and you had to like beat your enemy. It was all right. I don't actually remember many of the other games, but I remember there was a few. Actually, yeah, there was a game where you had like this light, this beam of light, where you had to set up mirrors, and you had to like spread the light off into different directions and get the light to like hit one part, and then you have like the prisms that like split the light up into multiple directions, and all that. That was quite good as well. Wasn't bothered about the comic part of it or anything like that though, so whatever. Okay, number 478 is Sunflowers. This is, I think it was a free game that came out on the PS Vita. It's a game with what I consider to be the happiest title screen I've ever seen. It's just a sunflower looking so happy. Like, I've never seen anything so happy in my life. Very, very simple game. You basically control the sun and you have to tap the screen. I think it's tap the screen or press a button or something to shoot out sunbeams, and you had to like hit the clouds so that the clouds could drop water drops onto the sunflowers so that they'd grow, and then you'd collect them and then they'd add to your garden. Very simple game, really not much to it, but you know, you collect the sunflowers, and that was quite nice, getting the sunflowers to like add up and all that. Plus it was free, so I really had no objection to trying it out. And as far as I could tell, there wasn't any microtransactions. To be honest, I don't even remember if it was free. I might just be making it up, because I think I might have got it like 50 pence or something. If it wasn't free, I don't fully remember, so don't quote me on that. I remember it was alright, like, you know, yeah. And you had different types of stages. You had like a tropical stage where you had different types of flowers, and there were certain flowers that were rarer than others. And you could do things with the flowers as well, but I don't really remember. Oh, I remember there was also the night thing as well, where I think you controlled the moon, like night phases, where you control the moon and you had to shoot moon rays at the flowers. Yeah, because if you missed with the sun, if you missed the clouds and then you hit like a storm cloud, or you hit a flower, it would burn the flower and you'd lose the flower. And there's a sort of point scoring system to that. Number 477 is Meat Boy. I actually didn't play this game that much, but it was alright. It was good enough for me to want to include it on this list. Meat Boy is the predecessor to Super Meat Boy. You play as Meat Boy. If you know what Super Meat Boy is, it's basically that, but imagine like much simpler stages, simpler graphics. Yeah, there's really not much to say. I think it was like a flash game or something. It was alright. I had a bit of fun with it, but I really don't have much to say about it, because I didn't play it that much, to be honest. But yeah, that's that. Number 476 is F1 Race, which has one of the most generic names ever for a game. But this was a game that came out on the Game Boy, and I got this for my 10th birthday, which was the same birthday that I got my Game Boy, because I got my Game Boy with 3 games. There's F1 Race, Alleyway, and a game that was something football, but it was American football. And even if it was like, you know, soccer football, I still probably wouldn't have really been into it, but I didn't understand how to play it at all, so I just kind of like was never able to play that game. But I did play F1 Race. It's like a Formula 1 game, but it's on Game Boy, so if you imagine like a racing game, but the bare basics. I'm noticing a lot of the time I'm saying it's the bare basics for a lot of these games, but it's true. A lot of these are the absolute bare basics for these games. But yeah, it was alright. I remember the map was quite a strange thing, because it was kind of like the Australian style map, where like North and South America is on the right of the map, and then you've got like Europe and Asia and Africa on the left, and then Australia in the centre. It's quite strange. Yeah, it was also just good to have, you know, it was my first portable game console, so it's something to play. Number 475 is a game that you should all be familiar with because it came free on every PC and probably still does, and that is Minesweeper. This is a game where some people just don't have a clue how to play it. Basically, the way that it works is, I'll explain it now. You got a grid, and in this grid are bombs, and you don't know where the bombs are. You only know You only know that there's a set amount of bombs, so you have to find out where the bombs are. And if you click on a space, it will open up the grid, and it will give you numbers saying like 111, and the ones mean that one of the spaces next to that square is a bomb, like either horizontally, vertically, or diagonally. You have to do this to use the power of deduction to work out where the individual bombs are. So something might have 3 bombs next to it, but you realize that there can't be one in a certain space because the next to that space is one with a 1, and that's already been accounted for, so you know there can't be one in this space. It's the power of deduction, and if you play on the higher difficulties, it can get really hard, like stupidly hard, to the point where it is just luck. Like you will to the point where if you play on the absolute highest difficulty, you'll press on a random square and it will just say 7, like that level of difficulty. Number 474 is a game called Zeus. This was a game that I got on the Amiga. This actually came kind of bundled with a few other games on the Amiga. And what's strange is that I had to research this because I have memories of a game called Zeus, which it turns out I don't know the name of it. It was a very, very simple game where you played as like a little spaceship in this little stone ruins area. But that wasn't Zeus. This other game was Zeus. And there is even a small chance now that I'm mistaken because it was one of those really obscure games. It was a puzzle game where you had all these blocks and you had to slide them along, and if you got 2 blocks to match with the same pattern on, they disappeared. So you had all these series and the goal was to clear out all the blocks, so you slide them along. Say sometimes you might have 3 of a certain pattern, and you can't just slide one over the other because that would get rid of 2 of them and leave one of them just by itself. So you'd have to sort of maneuver them in such a way that the last block touches both of the other ones at the same time, so you get rid of all of them. That type of puzzling going on. Although, I remember reaching a stage whereby you get to a point where there's one patterned block and there's only one of them. Like, this is my memory, and this is really old game, like Amiga. I was very young at the time. So you had a blue block with a circle in it, so you have to match it with other blue blocks with a circle in it, and there wasn't any. So I don't know if they just put an impossible level in the game just to say like this is the end of the game, as opposed to just telling you completed the game, or whether there was some really crazy trick or something that I never knew. But like I say, I never knew about it, so I don't know. But I quite enjoyed it, you know, sliding the blocks across and trying to work out the puzzles. So that's it for this part. Hope you enjoyed it. Next time we'll be continuing on from game 473, and I will see you all then. So bye.